Hello again. Well, the lockdown's almost over, so we're all thinking about getting back out there and doing some walking. I'm updating some of my gear for this year, in particular my cooking arrangements when I go lightweight multi-day SOTA trekking. Originally I used to use a beer can pot and a titanium windshield. That worked fine. You see the pot's a bit black from last year. But I found myself rather limited in terms of food, limited just to dehydrated food and instant cooked food, which once you're over a week, it's not that nice. So I wanted a bit more control over my cook time, just a slightly longer cook time really, because of course this is just the boiling water. You don't cook in this pot. So I decided to swap, and I've swapped for a very common titanium pot. 650 millilitres, just about 30 euros off Amazon. Yeah, so very cheap, they do the job. But of course this was going to need a new shield, and so luckily I had plenty of titanium left over from my last windshield that I made last year. And here we see it. I just thought maybe I'd show how you actually go about making these windshields. So the first thing is, of course, you have to print off your design. I've got my design printed off there. There are various programs on the internet you can use to create these things. As you can see, it's got all the dimensions on it as well. It's quite nice. And all the holes, importantly, where I'm going to punch the holes are there. So once you've got that printed, it needs to actually go on your titanium foil. Now, as you'll notice, it comes in a roll. And once it's rolled up, there's absolutely no way you're going to roll it in the other direction, ever. You just ruin it. So you've got to work with that roll. So you find a place, unroll it, and you'll notice that I'm looking at the inside here, not the outside. Always put your, well, depending on your punch, but I think generally it's a good idea to put your pattern on the inside, the bit that's going to curl up like this, okay? And of course you'll cut round your pattern. I often use, to do this, I often use some double-sided sellotape to stick it down. I haven't yet removed that, I will do. So you'll need to then cut it out once you've got it stuck down. Cutting it out is actually very easy. I just use some standard stout aluminium kitchen shears, and it does the job. As you can see, it's quite a neat cut, cuts it very easily. But of course it wrecks the aluminium. Because this is called titanium, much harder, so they won't be much good for anything else other than cutting more titanium once you've used it. That's fine, they're only about a tenner or so, so that does the job there. So you've got it all cut out. You'll notice some here, it's a bit tricky getting around these corners, so I had to flatten it out. I used just a pair of flat pliers and yeah, it flattened out very nicely. I'll sand some of these rough edges off later. Then it comes time to punching your holes, and there was a good reason why we put our pattern on the inside. It's because we're going to use this. It is a McGill 303 heavy duty paper punch. This had to be ordered from America, just like the titanium foil, not available in Europe. Maybe there's a European alternative, I don't know. I would recommend a heavy duty paper punch and not a metal punch. I tried it the first time, and I found with an actual dedicated metal punch, it doesn't have a slanted punch that goes through. It's not sharp, it's perfectly flat. And when you punch through the titanium, it has a tendency to kink the titanium, and you get all these kinks around the holes. It looks terrible. Not a very nice effect. I should have had my old comb down here, you could see. So you'd be surprised, but a paper punch will actually do a much neater job. This paper punch has a little compartment there. It collects all the little discs that pop out. Normally you'd keep that closed, but if you can imagine, if you're trying to punch here and line it up, just eyeball it, well, that's a nightmare. You can't see where you're punching. So it's actually better to keep this open this up, now turn it the other way around. You notice how I've got this upside down and I'm punching from the outside in. That means that the burr is always on the inside and the outside looks nice and smooth. Then I look down my hole. Now, when I line this up, slip it over my titanium foil. Sometimes it's good to just put one finger down here and hold it steady there on the back side with your middle finger, if you've got the space. An extra set of hands is sometimes nice because this stuff curls up like the devil. But there you go, I'm holding it nice and steady now. I can see perfectly through that hole. I've got it lined up, and then I just punch through, and obviously look away, close your eyes. The disc will ping off. You have to hoover up maybe 20 minutes later, and okay it with the wife before you start creating a mess like that. And that's it. It's that simple. That's done. You remove your pattern. I'm going to keep the pattern for various reasons, because not only does it have the holes, it has markings for some tabs to help close it, and they may come in handy later on. What I am going to experiment with, what I started experimenting with last year, was magnets. I went to Iceland and I took some neodymium magnets. I noticed, of course, they're very, very strong, it's very hard to separate them. I've got two, and I only need two, they're quite light, and they do a wonderful job of closing this up. So you just put them together like that. Let's have one down the bottom, first pair there, line the sides up, bring it to the edge. Let's get a second pair. If you can only get them apart, there we go. You could actually put something between them, like a little plastic disc. It'd be easier to separate them, but I don't know if it's really worth the hassle. Then put this set there. Okay, I'll put it at the opposite side. There we go. And that holds it together wonderfully. That's really nice. And is it wide enough for the pot? There we are. That's a little bit narrow. There we go. The pot goes inside. Roughly thereabouts. Hang on. Perils of filming. It never works when you're trying to do it. Just going to open it out a little bit. Right, let's try again. There we go. It is a nice fit, really. So that's it. It fits in there very nicely, and you see the magnets hold it closed. Now, anyone who's studied physics quite a lot will say, hang on a minute, Matthew, this magnet in particular is going to get very hot. And when atoms get hot and start bouncing around, they lose their magnetism. And this is precisely what happened to me in the middle of Iceland last year. This one pinged off and the whole thing opened up. And I had to then kind of fold it and make another system. It wasn't very nice. So I looked into this, thought, magnets, are the high temperature magnets? There are higher temperature magnets. I found these from Magnet Expert. I'll put a link in the description, and these are called samarium cobalt magnets, and they can survive at a much, much higher temperature than ordinary neodymium magnets. So don't bother with the neodymium magnets, they won't work. The one at the bottom might hold, but the one at the top won't. So there you go. Hopefully that's the solution. I haven't actually tried it yet. So I'm going to do some experiments. I will take that. If it turns out that this also fails, what I will eventually end up doing is I'll use my my little tab here, and I'll cut a tab at the top, but use the magnet at the bottom, and call it quits. That's probably the best I can manage. But I'm pretty pleased with that. I think that looks really smart. For something homemade, I'm extremely pleased with the result. It looks as good as I think anything you can buy. Here's the stove. Stove's made from an old aluminium beer bottle. Inside it is a Red Bull can. So there's holes on the outside, and then you can't really see it very well. There's holes on the inside, so it's a double wall, chimney type stove. You find with a beer bottle, when you cut the neck off, it's a bit big. And the whole way to get these working is you need the right balance between the outflow and the intake. And once again, a bit of physics comes in handy here, because anyone who studies physics will know about Bernoulli's theorem, and that when you make things smaller, it's a bit counterintuitive. Instead of things flowing more slowly, they flow more quickly because it's being squashed, and so the rate, it actually comes up through this smaller hole. So I created a little reducer there. It's just from the bottom of a can. It just means it's a bit smaller hole, and it increases the outflow, and it helps with the draw, so it's drawing a bit better. It will work without it, but it also depends on the fuel. You should be very careful. One thing I ought to point out is if you go to Iceland, Most of the fuel you get there is what they call Rauchsprit, red spirits. It's isopropanol, very high in isopropanol. It burns so hot, my whole caldera was literally just bursting into flame. And I don't read Icelandic very well, but when I took a close look at the label, it said something roughly about diluting it with water when the temperature isn't like -27. As soon as I diluted it with water, it kind of calmed it down and it burnt a lot better. But you can see the results of that on the bottom of this can. So actually what you put in here is very important. Yeah, and the temperature at which it will burn is also very important. One thing to note here, you'll notice I've kept all my glue seams here. So there's glue on the bottom and there's glue at the side. There are some designs that have glue around here. If there's glue under the burners, even though it's what they call high temperature epoxy, this JB Weld, it oxidizes it and it gradually fails. So if you're looking at any design that's got glue around the top, my advice is it's probably going to fail. You need the glue down here where it's not as hot, then it will hold. This has been literally engulfed in flame thanks to this red spirit, and still in good shape. And of course, being an aluminium beer bottle, it's a bit thicker, so it's quite secure. So that's it. That's the cooking setup for 2020. What I should mention is weight. Of course, the beer can is very light. It's the lightest option you can have. But I started having muesli for breakfast in the morning. So that meant I took a tin bowl as well. Altogether, that came to about 80 grams, can and tin bowl. And when I got this is about 110. So you're looking at 30 grams extra for a titanium pot. But on the other hand, it has handles, so I'm not burning my fingers on these beer bands. And it's got a higher capacity and I can cook in it. So I think 30 grams is pretty acceptable sacrifice for an awful lot of versatility. So, like I say, that's it. This is what we're going to be using 2020. I'll let you know how it goes maybe at the end of summer. That's all. Bye for now.